Well, good afternoon, everyone. Um, Definitely a pleasure to be back to the ITAG community. As everyone kind of mentioned, it's we're in some challenging times. But again, this is kind of the time when it is good to just convene and just start sharing what we all know and how we can all get back to a better place. But just again, formally, my name is Brigitte Daniel. I'm Executive Vice President of Wilco. And today I'm so honored again to be back to talk about restarting, restoring, and reopening, how access control technologies can help navigate a safe return back to work, life, and play. So just quickly, I just want to go over just how we've allocated this time. Pretty much will be about 30 to 35 minutes, and that's how long we'll probably take just kind of talking through the presentation and just how the technologies that we're going to be at least addressing, and then we'll save about maybe 10 minutes for Q&A. But between now and then, for people who are not familiar with Zoom, there is a little menu button that you can use to put questions and answers in. I think we've all been Zooming for about 6 to 8 months, but if you haven't, definitely feel free to answer put your questions into that bar, and we'll try our best to just monitor that. That's definitely Lisa and the team will be looking. But if we don't get to some of those questions, we'll definitely get them at the end. I love to slice in questions during the conversation, and this is real casual, and just so definitely feel free if things come up. So we can kind of address them right then, for sure. But for the most part, let me just talk a little bit about who we are, because I think the last time I went to the ITAG, at least Tech 360, I talked a lot about diversity and inclusion, which always kind of is inherent in our DNA. But Wilco, for all that really don't know about my family's business, we are at this point an integrator of security surveillance and access control and IoT, which is the Internet of Things. And kind of on a prop tech side, we definitely do a lot of integration, particularly around new technologies, but definitely access control, video surveillance are really what we have really been in the business for a very long time. But we provide these services for commercial and multifamily, residential, industrial, and even public housing communities. And basically, these kind of technologies are all the things that are now access points for the built world, right? Real estate. And so we install it and we integrate all these kinds of different platforms in different types of facilities and buildings. We are the boots on the ground, per se. I always say we're kind of on the ground and in the clouds, literally connecting all the pieces together. And part of that really is about low voltage wiring, low voltage electricity, which is all the things that are now connected to these smart tech products. That electricity is now what is now in demand, really. And that also led us to provide low voltage design, which we started doing, helping architects and developers really look at where to place low voltage technology. And that also then led to us then even helping real estate developers and owners and projects really even look at technology and how to embrace it, because it can be a little intimidating. And there's a learning curve that we're finding that real estate entities just should know how it can complement, not be an expensive, expense need, but more of a complement to how to better manage. And we do that with like just new ways of innovation, new ways of inclusivity, and new ways of impact. But what most people really probably know us for, and what our start in the business is really rare, but really we're known for being one of the first cable providers in the country, at least one of the first minority-owned providers, definitely in the United States, but in Philadelphia, pretty sure one of the only. And for over 40 years, Wilco was one of like the first and the last remaining African-American owned operators. And we became known for really being a provider of those technologies and those services to Philadelphia's housing authority community, and just affordable housing in general. But the other side of that is we also provided, Class A type of amenities, which was also again cable, but we did that for like, different types of high-end high rises in Center City when those kind of services were just coming into the city. So this is like around the 70s and 80s. And it's an interesting kind of history. I mean, you kind of see my father's on there. We have a lot of interviews he's did with cable television. There's me, you know, in front of one of our first trucks. But we were really one of those first companies to start looking at building amenities, right? Because at that time, prop tech was cable. It was kind of access control. And while we were designing these buildings and these systems for basically, you know, cable television, we were also designing them for access control and closed circuit television. And it's funny because a lot of those infrastructures are literally still in place today. If you go to certain buildings in Center City or different parts of the region, that initial infrastructure that we put in, that initial wiring, is still in there from the 70s. You'll be very surprised. So it's interesting how wiring still literally from 40 years ago is still kind of the infrastructure backbone for new tech, but that was us. And then about 2 years ago, we hit a very pivotal moment in our history and our business. And Comcast, who we've been doing business for about, you know, the same amount of time really in the city, very like long decades, they had acquired our cable system and they acquired a lot of our systems that were in public housing. So then you couple that with just being in the early presence of just this new time of just cable coming into the cities, that infancy of the industry. We've been fortunate to really cultivate a very unique portfolio of clients and facilities. And those things, that technology has really allowed us to now transition, particularly with the acquisition of our cable subscriptions, to now new access, new different types of modern-based technologies. So if you see this building, this is kind of the new Vilco, right? This is really what we are now deep diving, and this is kind of my leadership. And these are modern access control technologies for real estate, for housing, for the built world, with the focus on the end user. And it can be applied to the administration. It could be applied to, you know, all the way from owners to managers, and all these things can also then be used basically also still by the person who holds the key fob, or definitely now the mobile credential. And that's where you see the industry going, the use of mobile phones in supporting access. And that's really kind of one of the things I always say, that cable television box that we provided in the 70s is now your mobile phone, right? You're now using a new method, a personal method, to access entertainment, health, jobs, access, right? So we're back in the game of really being a provider to homes, to buildings, but just with new technology. And up until 2019, these modern services were on the rise. I mean, a lot of people were making that turn, making that pivot. So it began to kind of see the churn in the marketplace, right? But then 2020 happens. And I think we were all just kind of you know, the world completely changed, right? You know, the rule book of what we've all been through and what we're going through is being completely written in real time. And I would hazard to guess that most of us are even operating today from home, or outside of the office, right? We're either in our living rooms. I mean, I definitely see a lot of living rooms you know, on the screen, or maybe we're at an office at home. But we're definitely, you know, engaging in maybe limited capacity because we're having staggered hours, or we're sharing internet with our kids who are also now virtually learning from home. And if you had any plans of doing anything in person, you know, we're quickly adapting to just what it means to do them virtually. So this is now the state. This is the new, you know, I never like to really say new normal, but it is a new way of our culture. Our culture has literally shifted on its access. And, you know, this is kind of why we're having this conversation today. And I mean, I definitely would like to hear, even Lisa, you know, I know there's definitely some hardcore ITAG members in, but what have you seen or heard about people in their response and just their perspective right now on return to work and just working from home?
No, absolutely. No, it's interesting. If I look very personally with Magic Hat and our clients, so as a consulting firm, we typically mirror what our clients are doing, and the majority of our clients are in the pharmaceutical or financial services in those industries. And what I've seen for the most part was first and foremost just an identification of any essential roles, which have quite frankly been like 10% of the workforces who are requested to return to an on-site work status. As consultants, the work that we do, it's all being done remote and virtually right now. So
Right.
lots of Zoom, that is my sunroom behind me. Right now, our team within my company, we're not going into work at all or to our client sites based on the type of
Right.
work.
And even the client sites, exactly.
Yep. What I hear from other employers and HR professionals really is wanting to make sure that the environment is safe, wanting to make sure the employees actually also perceive it as safe,
Mm-hmm.
and extra concern coming from employees. This is a new one in smaller organizations where multiple offices are in one building and things like lobbies and restrooms are shared among several businesses. So that's my state of the HR union for now.
And the thing is, we're still in the thick of this, right? We're still not, we're still quarantining per se. Just to your point about financial services, I think JP Morgan had even told all their traders and staff they had to come back to the office. I think that was just this past Monday. It was September 21st. States, like you said, are now offering indoor dining facilities. Capacity limits are being set and required. The suburbs, definitely in Philadelphia, it's a little slower, but definitely the suburbs, I believe, are now at 50% capacity. And we're still like juggling all these schedules, with competing needs on the home front, how we're operating differently. Because again, we're not sure yet how long it will be. I don't even know if Magic Hat has even set a date, but I think we were, first it was weeks, and those weeks turned into months, and now those months are turning into quarters, and now we're at the end of the quarter, right? We're at the end of the year. So, we're trying to balance all that, and we're trying to balance people actually are still, even a little fearful, but some people really do miss being at the office. There is some camaraderie that I miss, from people that I couldn't see all the time, or I'm used to seeing and just being more collaborative with. So all this is happening, and people are coming back, businesses reopening, and that's why we wanted to kind of have a little bit of a talk today about there are definitely tools. It's a definitely critical time. And there's tools to help kind of figure this out. But, one thing we started to do when the shutdowns occurred, we stepped back and just started just kind of taking inventory of our own clients, just like you have been, and really looking at surveys and doing research. And these are some of the things that we saw. I mean, the highest source of stress basically really has been, people's health, but not just their own health, the health of their loved ones, right? So you get a response of just what's on top of mind. And that's because a lot of times we're now being exposed to people that we've never been exposed to or haven't been exposed to literally for like the last, probably like 4, 5, 6 months, depending upon where you are. If you're in Pennsylvania, definitely around like 6 months for sure. So then there's also just kind of percentages just around people and their comfortability. One of the things that we're trying to do, even with our office, is just making sure people felt comfortable and they felt confident. Because that's really a big part of just the morale and the mentality of what you probably would need to make sure your folks were really in ingesting and feeling about this time. And then that's also part of just logistics. There is, research that we, just had been a part of or participated in or just kind of researched ourselves, where that nearly 2/3 felt still uncomfortable, or they felt that their facility wasn't prepared, as of yet. And then when you look at, the stance from a business owner, we also, and as an owner myself, but, we also have to balance all that and know that we have to get back to work, right? There is totally, the economy needs to fire back up in a way. We need to get back to a financial state being in the last quarter. Like I said, people have to make some good numbers, at least as much as we can before we get to December and these holiday times. So that's kind of why we really started to have more conversations with our clients. And I think that's when even you, myself, and the ITAG team, and, we just started to talk about what can people do? Like, what can we do? And it's an interesting question because we have to balance a lot of different, again, interests and needs and liabilities. And there's so much more of a cross sector of who's in the conversation, right? There's HR, there's executive leadership, there's IT, It's really spanning the gamut of like the people who need to be at the table to make sure we're moving forward, but yet we're moving forward strategically, cautiously, and healthily. So one thing we definitely understand is that we had to reimagine the office with our clients, the ones that definitely are managing offices. And it's important because when you're a workplace leader and you're thinking about your office space, and we have a floor plan here, we really started helping people look at where are the parts that you definitely want to make sure are protected. So we definitely talked about touchless, which was one of the first things that you probably started to hear about, not touching things. And of course, self-screening and distancing technology. And those are the things that we really kind of started to hone in. And this is probably around like March, April, what we needed to do. And really what we found out is that these kind of access security solutions were not just for offices, they're for every environment. Every environment, and they're all different, needs something, whether it's commercial real estate, whether it's just your typical enterprise, retail store, multifamily, houses of worship, churches. We've had so many conversations with so many different types of sacred places with congregations that are still not open and probably won't be open until next year. Because a lot of times you have people who are elders. There's so many things you need to think about when you're letting people back into the church. There can't be any singing, right? You have to be careful about that type of oral use. Definitely for education. Some schools just said, we're not even going to do it, right? They just said, we're not even going to touch opening right now. So there's a lot of movement, but there's still a lot of people still holding back. So what we then found out was, what are the top 4 things that people wanted to address? And those top 4 things ended up, again, being touchless technology, temperature screening, temperature controls, reduced occupancy, and then visitor management. And these were kind of the things that we wanted to really focus on for either employers, for landlords, for property managers, and help them be implemented correctly. And really, these are all technology-driven investments. And they can be, from the end of the spectrum to just very basic low level to even just a higher tech. But what we also wanted to focus on was not just the technology, but also things that didn't have a short shelf life. Like, we still have to think about, these are technologies that can go beyond COVID, right? They can really be an investment to future-proofing your facility. Again, whether you are a church, whether you are office, whether you are, business, or whether you are, just, a restaurant that needs to figure out how to stay just protective of your people, your patrons. So that's kind of what led us to really kind of deep diving, and that's kind of what we'll start with. And touchless access control is really the biggest one that we thought we would like to always begin, because this is access control at its bare, the new modern access control, right? And controlling access to a building or facility really is the foundation of security. At just point blank, period blank, that's what it is. And throughout the last 5 years, I would probably say, access control has pivoted completely. It's not really more so a key. I don't think I've even seen a hard key in probably at least 3 years. A lot of people use key fobs. A lot of people are using various types of cards. But where we see the heightened ability is when the use of the mobile phone. And with the well-designed access control system, meaning that the basis for your, for your infrastructure, you can literally monitor and manage who enters and who exits, and from any building, really, that's tied to the system. And the hardware is so sleek, and the aesthetics are even they're just getting either, for lack of a better word, prettier every year. They're just, it's becoming such a very creative industry. But for the most part, for the user, it just makes everything easy to use because it's all on one platform. And that's how you get to touchless. You get to touchless, that's now becoming very popular with COVID, just in terms of a safeguard, but you get there through mobile phone. And that's the point of the technology, the automation. And they're cloud-based as well. So again, just to those points, you have one credential, you can manage access from anywhere. So sometimes even when the shutdown started and people literally had to leave, like the next day, the manager literally could shut down that office and control access from their phone or even their computer at home. That's what it did. It allowed people to really pivot very quickly, and to still view everything. So that's always the first step that we took. And that's one of the things that people started asking us about. What is touchless and how do we get there? The other, component, let me just go back there. The other component was temperature screening terminals. We started getting approached by a lot of different manufacturers, probably heavy starting maybe April 1, literally. Temperature screening, which has been definitely around. It's not new, right? It's just difference of what it's being used for, but it's just biometric access. It really has been popular because it's the one thing that's a big first layer into extra layers of security, and have been helping just businesses really prevent or limit access based on body temperature. And I think when we first started hearing about, just the virus, it was all about temperature and what you had and what that could be a symptom of. And definitely, we've seen it a lot in, let's see, I've seen it in restaurants for say, we've seen it, of course, we did a lot of installs,
Airports.
offices, airports, where people said they saw it this summer at amusement parks. Amusement parks, you could not definitely go and without having your temperature screened. I think there's a competing factor of handhelds that of course is very easy, but for what we found from customers or clients is that the handheld does have its own kind of, limitations. Either you have to pay someone to do that. And what if people don't want to have their temperature screened? Then there's this whole, like, there could be a debate or some kind of conflict that you don't have with a machine that just does it and takes the picture and it takes it, documents. And again, the documentation that technology provides is key. And the documentation for even contact tracing now becomes a part of why the technology is being driven versus just someone having a handheld, temperature screener. So there's been a lot of uptick. And I think that's only going to continue to rise. I mean, we're about to maybe get into a potential flu season. So even myself, my daughter was sick last week. And, like that kind of concern usually is just like, she has the flu. But no, now you have to take an extra precaution. What is it? Make sure it's not anything else. But I know that even where she goes to school, they started using a machine just because it was just easier. They used a reader just to make it easier for the kids to even get used to it. So there's benefits to it. And I think that's been driving just that interest. You can put it on a stand, you can put it on a wall, a turnstile. It can also take attendance. So even beyond any type of concern of, the pandemic, it's something that can be used for even your own employees going forward. Making sure they have a mask. The mask detection is very key. It alerts when someone doesn't. So, there's definitely mandates to keep mask wearing. And that's been helpful for a lot of different places that don't even have a receptionist. They just want to make sure people are coming in, they're masked, and they're just healthy. So, it's been very ideal, and it's cost, effective, and also it can integrate to what you already have. And that was a big, concern of ours. We didn't want to have people make any investments that couldn't easily be integrated with what they had now. Like, we're already dealing with pandemic, make things as easy and really kind of problem-free as possible. And that again leads us to occupancy, which this is kind of like my favorite, kind of COVID, star that's kind of come out of this time, because occupancy really is just about really using data to manage the use of your space, but it's about people counting and people flow. And it's one of those kind of platforms that until COVID came, it was slowly on the rise. Like, it wasn't kind of like, we need this. It was just like, if you wanted to understand where people were in your building, where they were going, and really were like in a very innovative space, it was like a no-brainer. But now it's so needed. I love this. I love it because it's all sensor based. So they're just AI sensors. But what it does now is measure social distance, right? You can literally see who's moving and where they're moving. If once your floor plan is set and, the topography of what we get from you, we designed it out, and then we'll literally put the platform on top of that platform, on top of your floor plan. You literally will see the body's moving. So you'll see who's social distancing or not. You'll see where people are going more so that you can clean that a little better, right? If they're going to this door, they go into that room, or they sitting in this area more, you'll basically be able to tell your cleaners, make sure that gets done a little bit better. It'll monitor who's in there, how many people. So we're now literally on, capacity requirements. That's everywhere. Everywhere we're, if you're in your sunroom now, Lisa, at some point you're going to get back to Magic Hat, those offices, and they're going to say only a certain amount of times that people can be here, and they're going to have to measure how many people are there. And that's what this does. It'll even alert when you get to 24%, you get to 25%, there's something that comes and says, definitely stop or halt the entry. And I think, it can go on a ceiling, it can go, on a wall, it can hang down. And this is such a cost-effective platform. So this one I like because there's so many uses for it, even outside of the pandemic. I mean, literally just monetizing the use of your space will be incredibly helpful when you have data and you actually are seeing who's in there, when they're in, how long they're in there. I mean, this is kind of one of those platforms that kind of is now seeing its time. But I love it. And one that we're going to start pushing really quick. Did you want to say anything right here?
I did. Yes, you can see me toggling mute.
I know, yeah.
I know. So that's an indicator. We actually got a question or two. So to do that, and before we got too far ahead, because one was about the temperature scanners.
Mm-hmm.
So the effectiveness of the hardware of temperature scanning, given it could be weather, it could be summer heat, it could be cool, and are there aspects to the technology that reduce kind of false positive readings? If you have any comments there.
Absolutely. Yes. So we have seen, these readers that we have used, and pretty much we have two manufacturers that we use. One of them is Hike Vision. So if you're familiar with Hike Vision, household name, but they're best used within a vestibule, a lobby, not outside, for that specific region of just the variables of temperature, whether it's cold or whether it's really hot. And if you do have to have it in an outdoor space or where you might have an influence of weather, then there is something called a black box that you can literally put around the reader, and that will help to at least get it to a much more realistic, if not calibration, to what the core temperature of your body is, because that's really what it's measuring. Some measure eyes, some measure forehead, but at the end of the day, it's your core temp. And again, you can limit just any variables. They're pretty accurate though. I mean, they've been, this is not new technology. It's just getting a new sense of newness now. But for the most part, it's definitely, the accuracy, particularly now, is pretty high. And if it is a little off, it's not off to the sense of it still won't monitor something that's even abnormal or at a threshold where you have set your temperature reader to look for a temperature that's above pretty much a lot of the normal temperatures we've seen have been like 100.4. That's when it starts alerting. You'll definitely know that that's not going to be a false positive. That's going to be someone that truly has probably a high temperature of some sort.
Great. No, thank you.
So, again, and temperature being one of those, types of symptoms that it definitely alerts to potentially, you got to be careful, like potentially maybe, being something you want to safeguard. But a lot of times, a lot of things are just asymptomatic. So, again, there's layers to this. There's layers to this, and there's layers to what security can be. But with touchless, with temperature, with occupancy that I'm talking about now, these are really great steps to provide just healthy access and securing the workplace. But again, there's one last one that I want to just mention, and that's visitor management. And once you have capacity understood, then that's when it helps to have people come in that you can make sure are healthy. So visitor management basically is self-explanatory. It is the management of visitors. It's the management of your patrons. It's the management of even, your employees. It's in the management of even the owners. It's the management of anyone that comes in. And I think a lot of different buildings and people have to now take a self-screening before they go into their office at this point. And it could be through app, probably a lot of different types of questions can be put in there. What's your temperature? Have you been associated, or have you, been in contact with anyone that might have had COVID? I mean, there's just different types of ways that you can start to look at just self-certification, self-attestation, they call it, about what your health is on your own versus even having a temperature screener do it. And this is kind of even more common. I know the city of Philadelphia has screening. I know a lot of major offices, you have to go, law firms are totally screening right now before they have to come, and then you have to then go to staggered hours. And of course, that's all part of visitor management or occupancy. But again, these are just one of these extra layers. And we're seeing it become a huge component because, again, even when you all come back, even like for Magic Hat, Lisa, you're still going to have to come back staggered. They're not going to just say, oh, everybody come back. We're, I doubt that was probably happen.
Yeah, no, our office and our conference room, right? So when I look at occupancy, I'm like, yeah, we couldn't put the whole team in that room.
Right.
And be compliant.
Right.
So, a couple more questions now that we've seen temperature screening, visitor management, see touchless entries. If you're working at a smaller company and you could only invest in one of these, which is most important? Which is most important to keep employees safe?
Oh, access control. The first one being just basic access control, touchless. Because if you had to make an investment, you can always, that's your foundation for even adding on later, right? Even through access control system and making things touchless, you can add on a self-screen, you can add on a temperature reader, you can add on occupancy, but at least getting that initial investment, which it really is, of access control in your building that's modern, cloud-based, that will allow you to easily make pivots when you need to. That's the best place to start. That's where we started, just in our own company. We just made everything touchless and we just built on from there, literally built on from there.
Nice. Well, and with that, so if I can just ask you to keep going there in terms of what, have you employed all four and more at Wilco, and talk a little bit about the success and how people are doing, because your employees have been back. So
and we never stopped. So Wilco, we're an essential business. So when we started really having to really look at our team, this, I guess we're mid-March, that's when things just started to shut down. We realized, I guess the governor issued out what is an essential business probably a week after, or maybe a couple of days after, who could remain open. We were one of those types of entities. So we've been going to sites, going back and forth to our homes, to our offices since March. So we've been in it. And that's why we wanted to have our own security and upgrades, because we needed to do it too. So we started looking at access control touchless, because we had key fobs just like a lot of different companies. And we started also getting new partnerships for our clients for it. Then we went to temperature readers, and we had temperature readers, in our office, just to make sure people could even pass by and test themselves. Literally, people, I don't think we have a day where people walk by our temperature readers and they just want to make sure they're okay. And now occupancy is becoming, of course, big. We don't have a lot of of team members at our office. Our office is huge, but our team has been streamlined for a while, so we didn't have the necessary capacity concerns, but the capacity requirements are now becoming more prevalent and more needed. But again, that's why we like the cloud, because again, when COVID hit, like I said, when COVID hit, the clients that had it already, literally, they all they had to do was let us know, what they needed, what was going on. And literally all the platforms that we provided, the cloud-based ones for sure, it allowed them, and that's like the Brevos, right? The Open Paths, the Saltos. And again, we can, talk about in more detail if anyone wants information, but all they had to do was just adjust the telemetry of the customer base and look at it, and all those different types of pivot points about visitor access that just pushed through the software. It just pushed through on its own and literally went down through the infrastructure onto the site. And that saved so many people, because they didn't have to buy it right away. They've already had it. And a lot of those new software, a lot of the visitor management platforms were free. It just came with the system, because it's software, right? It's now cloud-based software. Things can just easily be upgraded, easily scaled, easily implemented because it's all, again, through the cloud. It just goes right
Fantastic.
down into the hardware. And
Yep.
that's the gem. That's
No,
the
great.
gem.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the gem. And again, I think it's important for anyone that's servicing companies and servicing offices right now, that these aren't kind of like security theater, as is a term that I've been hearing. It's not security theater. These are just different ways to future-proof your investment. Because your investment is your building, it's your team, it's your staff, but making sure they are confident. What do we say? Confident
Yeah.
and safe and comfortable. That's how you get people to do their job, do it well, and do it just with pride and safety, knowing that they're safe, their people are safe, their home is safe, their place is safe. Like, that's what you want to be able to do. So what we, again, I'm always about, again, the access controls, the foundation. These are kind of the things that access control can then like integrate, right? It's the entrance, it's the garage, whether you're in a garage in a building or garage, definitely at your home, if you're even getting into smart residential. It's your turnstile, it's an elevator. It's the security, it's literally the video access. It's the HVAC, which is definitely becoming now part of access control, right? Just the lighting is definitely now becoming part of, these are all smart technologies, sensors.
Right.
Now, definitely, these are the new tenant amenities, visitor management. These are now all the things that once you have your platform selected, it's easy to kind of pivot and transition and really, really move through the new tech that will now be a part of your built infrastructure for your business, for your office, or for, your team and your employees.
Great. Excellent. Thank you.
So, that's really where we are. We're all home. We're all Zooming. I see so many, good faces in people's, beautiful places. But I definitely, I wasn't going to be able to do an at home, for 8 months. Let me tell you, I definitely liked coming back to my office. But it's a time where we just all need to kind of lean in, pull in, and figure out what works best for one, our ability to make business and do what we need to do for financially, but also, protect health. So one thing we did do, for everyone that's registered, and I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get the information, we did provide and created an access control planning worksheet. So if you're interested in some type of service, and there's one thing we find out when we go to site visits, there's a lot of knowledge that you probably don't know quite all the time. This will help you prepare even for what you might need. There's questions on there that you should probably just have for your own sake of what your building does or what your office does, particularly if you're an owner or developer or landlord. And this is something of interest. It'll just help you kind of look at your whole infrastructure, your IT. And if you would like more information, we can follow up, but this is a good place to start for sure. So yeah, we'll send that out to everybody. But yeah, if there's any questions, for sure, this is probably the time to also ask more.
Yeah, no. Patrick, I see a hand.
Yeah, I have a question. That was great, Brigitte. I particularly like your point about what all this does. All this is to give our employees confidence and comfort and let them do their job and focus in the way that we all want them to. And I'm thinking a little bit about the other side of how a company goes from this is like a nice to have to a need to have, in terms of, are there industries where they're required to be taking temperature, or liability? Oh, you weren't monitoring occupancy, now you're in trouble. Are you seeing any of going to that strength to really protect themselves?
Yeah, there's some churches, nonprofits have been coming to us. Literally, we're about to install and finish a quote for a couple churches that need to look at liability purposes for insurance. So they ordered a couple of temperature readers. The liability component definitely will probably even gain in steam and momentum.
Right.
And again, a handheld will do that, but a handheld, there's so many other considerations you have to think about with a handheld.
Yep.
That, again, someone being paid to do it. You're also putting that person.
Well, it occurs to me, so my children, as an example, they go to daycare. They do a handheld thermometer, but it occurs to me, no one ever sees the number except for the person. So with your system, there's a record. Okay, Charlie Hayakawa was 98.6 at this time, where no user error. Do we know that he didn't get missed, or what was the temperature?
Absolutely. And before, like I said, before even my daughter, because they were doing handheld too, but before they kind of switched to a new this system. They weren't even really writing it down. Like they just kind of said, okay, they're cool, they're fine, they have 97, that's fine. But it definitely doesn't hurt to have literal pattern and documentation
And the
of
record. Yeah.
and a record, yes, sir, a record of this, all the types of different types of body elevations, whether it's just regular or whatever, coming in to the facility. Because again, we still have to contact trace all this too, in the way we still have to figure out how we're all going to work together as a country to make sure that we're really, putting our hands around this so we can start to move beyond it.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps. Technology is going to be a big part of that for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well,
Patrick, thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, no. And hey, I'm just doing because I know we're all booked to the hour on the hour.
We're right at 2. Yeah, we're right at 2:00.
We're right there, and a couple people are jumping off.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Brigitte. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah. That was perfect. I think everyone learned something there, and very well done. So thank you for that informative presentation. Really appreciate it.